In a world where authority is often misused, a routine traffic stop was about to reveal the stark realities of power and perception. Two officers believed they were in control, pulling over a lone driver ready to flex their authority. But what they didn't know was that the woman behind the wheel wasn't just any driver. She was their new boss, the chief of police. This encounter was about to change everything. Meet Naomi Carter, a woman of quiet strength and resilience. Today marked the beginning of a new chapter, her first day as chief of police in the bustling town of Cedarview. After years of hard work and dedication, this achievement was one she had fought tirelessly for, overcoming barriers in a justice system often designed to keep individuals like her from rising. As Naomi navigated the winding highway leading into the city, the early morning sun painted the horizon with warm hues. Her hands gripped the steering wheel a bit tighter than usual. This day should have been a celebration, yet an uneasy feeling gnawed at her gut. Cedarview wasn't just any town. It had a reputation. Known for its deeply conservative culture, the police department had long been plagued by reports of bias, particularly against minorities. Naomi had read the troubling reports and listened to the stories of those who felt unjustly treated. Despite her qualifications, many officers had openly expressed their discontent with her appointment, an African-American woman leading their department. But Naomi was not one to back down easily. Just as she approached a traffic light, now flashing red, a sudden array of blue and red lights lit up her rearview mirror. A patrol car pulled in behind her, sirens blaring. Instinctively, Naomi's heart raced. She sensed this was no coincidence. Pulling over to the side of the road, she heard the grass on the shoulder crunching beneath her tires. Two officers, both white, stepped out of the vehicle. The senior officer, a broad-shouldered man in his late 40s, approached her car with a calculated stride. The younger officer trailed closely behind, suspicion etched across his face. Naomi lowered her window, her pulse steady yet alert. The senior officer leaned in slightly, his eyes scrutinizing her vehicle before settling on her. "License and registration," he demanded flatly, his tone dripping with practiced authority. Naomi reached into her glove compartment, retrieving the documents in silence. She had learned that in moments like this, discretion was often the best approach. As she handed them over, she noticed the senior officer's eyes narrow slightly, but he remained silent. The younger officer, however, was less restrained. "What brings you out here?" he asked, his voice tinged with suspicion. "This area isn't exactly safe, if you know what I mean," he added, smirking. Naomi's stomach churned, yet she maintained her composure. "I'm on my way to work," she replied. "And where exactly would that be?" the younger officer pressed, leaning closer, his arrogance palpable. Naomi paused for a moment. She could easily reveal her position and end the charade, but something urged her to hold back. She had been in this situation far too often. The power dynamic was clear, and she didn't want to create unnecessary tension on her first day with the very officers she would soon lead. "You'll find out soon enough," she said calmly, locking eyes with the young officer. There was no anger in her voice, but her confidence made it clear that she was not intimidated. Sensing the situation escalating, the senior officer intervened. "Let's not make this difficult, ma'am. We can take this further if need be." There it was, the veiled threat. The subtle display of authority made Naomi's patience thin. She had endured this kind of treatment for years. Disrespect, condescension, and baseless assumptions rooted solely in the color of her skin. She had fought too hard and risen too high to let this slide. Taking a deep breath, Naomi decided she had played along long enough. "That won't be necessary," Naomi said firmly. "I'm Chief Naomi Carter. I suggest you reconsider how you're handling this situation." The shift in the atmosphere was palpable. Both officers froze, confusion washing over their faces. The senior officer blinked in disbelief, his brows furrowing as the reality hit him like a punch to the gut. The younger officer's smug demeanor evaporated, replaced with shock and a hint of panic. "You're the chief?" the senior officer stammered, clearly caught off guard. "Yes," Naomi replied, her voice unwavering. "And I'd like to know why I was stopped, and why this line of questioning is even happening." For a moment, neither officer spoke. The younger one fumbled for words, searching for an excuse that would salvage the situation. But the damage was already done. The power dynamic had shifted. And they felt it. The senior officer cleared his throat, trying to regain his composure. There must have been a misunderstanding. Naomi didn't let him finish. No, this isn't a misunderstanding, she interrupted, her tone sharp. This is exactly the problem. You stop people like me without cause, make assumptions, and flex your authority because you think you can get away with it. The senior officer opened his mouth to protest, but no words came out. He knew she was right. Naomi's calm, unflinching demeanor only highlighted their failures. You see, she continued, locking her eyes on theirs, it's officers like you who make people distrust the system, and it's people like me who are here to change that. Both officers stood in silence, their faces drained of color. Naomi felt the weight of the moment settle in. This wasn't just about her. It was about everyone unjustly stopped, questioned, or harassed because they didn't fit someone's narrow view of who belonged in certain spaces. Stepping out of the car, she stood tall and addressed them. You'll be reporting to me personally for the next few weeks. I'll be reviewing every traffic stop you make, and I suggest you think long and hard about how you handle yourselves from now on. The senior officer finally found his voice. We didn't mean any disrespect, Chief. It won't happen again. Naomi nodded, but she knew his words were empty. It would likely happen again, not with these two, perhaps, but with others. That's why she was here, to root out the deep-seated prejudice that had plagued Cedarview's police force for too long. Good, she said quietly before turning back to her car. As she drove away, Naomi allowed herself a moment to breathe. She had won this round, but many more battles lay ahead. Her position as chief of police was more than just a title. It was a responsibility. A responsibility to ensure that no one else had to endure what she had just experienced. Later that day, Naomi gathered the department for her first meeting. The tension in the room was thick as she stood before the officers, commanding their attention. She recounted the events of that morning, leaving no detail unspoken. I'm not here to embarrass anyone, she began, her voice steady. But I am here to make it clear that this kind of behavior stops now. Every officer in this department will be held accountable for how they treat the citizens of Cedarview, regardless of their race, gender, or background. A murmur of unease swept through the room, but Naomi didn't flinch. She had spent her life fighting for justice, and she wasn't about to stop now. This is your chance to prove that you are the kind of officers who serve with integrity, she continued, her gaze unwavering. But know this, I will not tolerate bias. I will not tolerate disrespect. And I will not tolerate anyone who thinks they are above the law. Her words reverberated in the tense silence of the room. A few officers shifted uncomfortably in their seats, while others nodded in quiet agreement. Naomi could easily discern who was ready to stand with her and who was not. But that didn't matter. She was prepared for the challenge ahead. Over the coming weeks, news of Naomi's encounter spread through the community. For some, it was a beacon of hope, signaling that change was finally on the horizon. For others, it served as a stark wake-up call. The media caught wind of the story, and soon Naomi became a symbol of what Cedarview desperately needed. Someone unafraid to confront injustice, someone determined to reform a fractured system. Yet, Naomi understood that this was merely the beginning. There was still a monumental amount of work to be done. Every traffic stop, every encounter, every decision would be scrutinized under a microscope. But she was ready. After all, she hadn't fought for so long, only to remain silent now. The struggle for justice was far from over. As she drove away from those two humbled officers, Naomi felt an undeniable sense of purpose. In that moment, she knew one thing for certain: she was exactly where she was meant to be.